The silent signal. The great galactic network buzzed with endless transmissions, trade offers, diplomatic debates, and cold reports of war. Yet one faint broken distress signal drifted quietly through the void, almost swallowed by the noise. It came from a dying colony on the edge of known space, a small planet where a gentle alien race known as the Terrene was fading under a mysterious plague. For weeks, their leader, a young healer named Lyra, sent desperate calls for help. Her soft voice carried through the stars, trembling with hope and exhaustion. "Please, anyone who can hear this. We are dying. We have no medicine left." But the galaxy had already moved on. The Terrene were not warriors, not rich, not politically useful. Their world offered nothing of value, so their suffering was ignored. Lyra sat beside a sick child, wiping cold sweat from its pale skin. The glow from the bio-lamps flickered, revealing the empty shelves where medical supplies once stood. Around her, silence filled the clinic, broken only by coughing and the hum of failing machines. She stared at the communicator again, whispering, "Please, someone answer." Then one night, when even the stars seemed dim, her console flickered to life. A low, steady voice spoke through static. "This is Earth Vessel Horizon. I received your signal." Her heart stopped for a moment. Humanity. A name that most galactic species whispered about but rarely contacted. The humans were known for their unpredictability, their dangerous compassion, their refusal to ignore suffering. "This is Lyra of the Terrene," she replied, voice shaking. "Please, you must not come. The sickness, it spreads fast. It kills without warning." The human voice paused before answering, calm but firm. "That's exactly why I'm coming." Across the void, the horizon changed its course. A lone human medic named Evan prepared his small ship for descent. The galaxy had ignored her, but humanity, stubborn, reckless, defiant humanity, had answered. As his ship entered the atmosphere, fire streaked across the sky. The dying villagers looked up and saw the burning trail of hope returning to their world. Lyra ran outside, wind whipping through her pale hair as the ship landed with a deep rumble. When the ramp lowered, a single human stepped out in a worn white medical suit. His voice carried across the empty field. "Show me you're sick," he said simply. And for the first time in months, Lyra felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The galaxy might have turned away, but a human had come. And the universe was about to remember what that truly meant. The human who healed the dying world, the air on the Terrene homeworld was heavy with decay and dust, carrying the faint scent of dying plants. Evan stepped into the dim corridors of the main shelter, his medical scanner humming softly in his hand. The alien eyes that followed him were filled with both awe and fear. No outsider had come to help before, certainly not a human. Lyra walked beside him, her steps weak but steady. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "No one survives long after entering this place. Even our healers are falling ill." Evan glanced at her through the transparent visor of his mask. "Then we'll have to change that," he replied. His tone was calm, almost casual, as if death itself was just another challenge to face. Inside the shelter, hundreds of Terrene lay on makeshift beds. Their skin had turned a dull gray blue, veins glowing faintly beneath the surface, a sign of the infection eating through their systems. The air was filled with shallow breathing, soft cries, and the constant hum of life support generators running on backup power. Evan moved from one patient to another, scanning, taking notes, injecting stabilizers, and setting up portable purifiers from his ship's cargo. His hands were steady, precise, almost mechanical in focus. But his eyes burned with something different. Compassion, determination. Lyra watched in silence. No alien she had ever met worked like this. Most would have turned away in disgust or fear. But the human moved without hesitation, kneeling beside every sick child, whispering comforting words they didn't even understand. When one of them coughed blood into his glove, he didn't step back. He simply changed gloves and continued. "Why?" Lyra finally asked, her voice small. "Why would you risk yourself for us? You don't even know who we are." Evan stopped for a moment and looked at her. "Because you asked for help," he said softly. "And that's enough." Those words struck her deeper than any cure could. Days passed. Evan worked without rest. He mixed alien herbs with Terran medical serums, experimenting carefully, guided by instinct and experience. He used the ship's AI to analyze tissue samples, creating improvised vaccines. He burned feverish corpses to prevent further spread, whispering a human prayer for each. Lyra joined him, learning, assisting, even when her hands trembled from exhaustion. Together they fought against something that had already taken most of her people. The sickness spread slower, the symptoms dulled, and for the first time the death rate began to drop. But hope always came with a cost. One evening, when Evan removed his helmet to wipe his face, Lyra saw the faint shimmer of blue veins crawling along his neck, the same infection he had been fighting. She froze. "You're infected," she whispered in horror. Evan didn't deny it. He just gave a tired smile. "Part of the job," he said. "I knew the risk when I came." Tears welled in her eyes. "Then why not leave now? You can still save yourself." He shook his head slowly. "Not while they still need me." Lyra couldn't speak. Her people had forgotten what true sacrifice looked like. The galaxy had forgotten it too, but standing before her was a being who cared more for others than his own life. That night she wrote in her medical logs, "The human doesn't heal with just medicine. He heals with something deeper, something our kind never understood: heart." By dawn, Evan's fever worsened, but he continued his rounds. The terrain began to recover one by one, and whispers spread through the colony. The alien who came from Earth was saving them. The galaxy had turned its back on them, but humanity, mad, brave, stubborn humanity, had chosen to stand by their side. And as Lyra watched him work through the pain, she realized something. The galaxy might have the science, the fleets, the power, but only humanity had the will to care when no one else did. The price of compassion. The morning light filtered weakly through the cracked windows of the clinic, touching the tired faces of those who had survived the night. For the first time in months, laughter echoed faintly in the halls. Children who had once been too weak to stand now played with bits of broken metal, their soft voices a fragile sound of hope. But in the small medical room at the back, Evan sat hunched over a console, his vision blurring. The infection had reached deeper now, his skin pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Every movement burned like fire beneath his veins. Still he continued typing, running new simulations on the vaccine. Lyra entered quietly, carrying a bowl of purified water. "You need to rest," she said softly, setting it beside him. He smiled faintly but didn't look up. "Rest after the cure," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, but the determination in it hadn't faded. Lyra clenched her hands. "You've already done enough, Evan. You saved us. The death has stopped." He turned toward her, eyes hollow yet alive. "Stopping death isn't enough. We need to end it completely. I won't leave half a cure behind." For a long moment she couldn't speak. Every part of her wanted to force him to stop, to make him rest. But she also knew this was who he was. Humans were like this. They didn't stop when things became unbearable. They kept going, even when it destroyed them. Outside, the colony had begun to heal. The weak sun broke through the dusty skies, and the terrain planted new growth pods in the soil. But word of the humans' actions had already spread across nearby systems. From orbit, other alien ships began arriving. Observers, traders, even scientists. Some came to study the strange plague, but most came out of curiosity, a human risking his life for an unimportant species. It sounded like madness. One of the arriving ships carried a delegation from the Galactic Council. They landed near the medical dome, their silver robes shimmering under the dim sky. The leader, a tall Avrinian diplomat, stepped out and looked around with mild disgust. "So it's true," the diplomat said. "A human came here and exposed himself to a level 5 contagion?" Lyra faced them firmly. "He didn't expose himself. He saved us." The diplomat's eyes narrowed. "You risked spreading the infection across the network by allowing this creature to interfere. Humanity is reckless. Always has been. Always will be." Before Lyra could reply, Evan stumbled from the doorway. His steps were slow, but his gaze was steady. "Maybe reckless," he said, voice rough. "But at least we do something while the rest of you sit in your clean towers." The diplomat frowned. "And now you'll die for it. What will that prove?" Evan's faint smile returned. "That life, any life, is worth fighting for." Silence filled the air. The council members had no answer. They left soon after, unable to face the truth in his words. That night, Evan collapsed at his workstation. Lyra found him on the floor, his datapad clutched in one hand. His breathing was shallow, his skin burning with fever. "No," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Don't you dare leave now. We're not done." His eyes opened weakly. "It's okay," he breathed. "Upload the formula." "The cure's ready." Tears blurred her vision as she connected his pad to the main console. Data streamed across the screen, a completed vaccine sequence, stable and replicable. He had finished it. Lyra injected him with the first dose, praying it would work. For hours, she waited beside him, holding his hand. Outside, the colony celebrated the news. The plague was over. The stars above the recovering world burned a little brighter that night, but inside the small clinic, the human who had brought hope lay still, caught between life and death. His body had given everything, Lyra whispered through her tears. "You gave us life. Now I'll make sure you don't fade away." The galaxy had ignored their cries, but one human had changed everything, and though he now lay silent, his actions had lit a fire that would not be forgotten. The day humanity spoke for the fallen days turned into weeks, and the plague that once devoured the terrene was gone. The colony breathed again. Crops grew, laughter returned, and children ran through the dusty streets that had once been silent. Yet inside the medical dome, the air was heavy with worry. Evan still hadn't woken up. His body lay motionless on a narrow cot, surrounded by humming medical machines. The vaccine he created had saved thousands, but his body had been pushed beyond its limits. His pulse was faint, his breath shallow. Lyra stayed beside him day and night. She spoke to him softly, hoping he could still hear her through the haze of sleep. "You promised me," she whispered one night, touching his cold hand, "that you wouldn't stop until it was done. It's done now, so wake up, please." Outside, the galaxy finally noticed what had happened. The story of the human medic spread faster than any trade rumor. Across the stars, news channels replayed the same image. A human in a white medical suit, carrying a terrene child from a plague camp. For centuries, the Galactic Council had called humans dangerous, primitive, unfit for unity. But now the same voices whispered something new. Maybe we were wrong. Soon, an Earth fleet arrived in orbit above the terrene world. The ships were not war vessels, but relief carriers. Massive ships marked with blue crosses and white lights. They descended gently through the clouds, dropping supplies, doctors, engineers, and new filtration units. Humanity had heard what one of their own had done, and they came. The leader of the mission, an older human admiral named Holt, met with Lyra outside the dome. His uniform was clean, his eyes tired. "He's one of ours," Holt said quietly, looking through the glass at Evan's still form. "We received his last transmission. He refused extraction until your colony was safe." Lyra nodded, tears welling. "He gave us everything. Even when the galaxy forgot us." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "That's the thing about us, Miss Lyra. We don't leave people behind." Within hours, they began using advanced human nanotech to stabilize Evan's body. Machines hummed, and warm light surrounded the bed as human doctors worked tirelessly. Lyra watched every movement, her heart racing between hope and fear. Meanwhile, outside the dome, representatives from multiple alien systems gathered. Some came to thank, some to observe, and others, mostly politicians, came to claim credit. The Galactic Council sent envoys who now tried to appear noble, praising the joint galactic effort that saved the terrene. But the truth spread faster than politics. Across the galaxy's message networks, one voice cut through all the lies: Admiral Holtz. He stood before hundreds of alien delegates. His voice broadcast to 1,000,000 worlds. "You ignored them," he said, his tone calm but sharp. "You heard their cries and did nothing." One man, one human, answered. He didn't ask for reward or safety. He didn't wait for permission. He just helped. He paused, eyes cold and clear. "So remember this. Humanity doesn't care for your politics or your excuses. When someone cries for help, we answer. That's what makes us human." The chamber fell silent. No one dared respond. That speech echoed across the stars. On hundreds of worlds, ordinary beings, alien and human alike, spoke the same words. When no one came, the humans did. Back on the surface, Lyra stood by the dome's window as the sun set behind the hills. The light turned the sky gold, and she thought of how their world had changed. The terrene were no longer forgotten. The humans had seen them, and that meant something powerful in a galaxy full of cold indifference. Suddenly, the soft tone of a heart monitor changed. Lyra froze, her eyes snapping to the bed. Evan's fingers twitched. Slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. He blinked against the light and tried to speak. Lyra leaned closer, smiling through tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved us." Evan gave a weak grin. "Told you I would." Outside, the human fleet shimmered in the night sky like a second set of stars, silent, watchful, proud. The galaxy had ignored her pleas once. But now it listened, because humanity had spoken through action, not words. The legacy of the human who answered the terrene world slowly bloomed again, healed by time and care. The air, once thick with disease, now carried the scent of new life. The fields were green, the skies clear, and laughter returned to the streets. The people spoke with pride when they mentioned the human who came when no one else would. Evan's recovery was slow. His body had endured too much, and every step still carried pain. But every morning he forced himself to walk through the colony, greeting those he had saved. Children ran to him, clinging to his coat, calling him the human healer. He always smiled, though his eyes carried the quiet weight of what he had seen. Lyra stayed by his side. She had become his closest friend, his partner in rebuilding what was lost. She had learned human medical methods and mixed them with her people's natural healing arts. Together they created a new clinic, a place built not just for the terrene but for any who needed help. Above its entrance hung a simple sign written in both their languages: "Help has no species." One morning, as Evan adjusted a scanner, a small shuttle descended near the village square. From it stepped a group of young alien students, wearing the crest of the Galactic Medical Academy. They had traveled from far worlds to learn from the man who had saved a dying planet. Evan greeted them with a warm but tired smile. "You came all this way?" A young avian student bowed slightly. "We came because we heard your story, sir. We wanted to understand why you did it. Why risk everything?" Evan looked out across the valley, watching children play near the rebuilt houses. "Because someone had to," he said simply. "Because sometimes doing nothing is the same as letting people die." Lyra nodded beside him. "He didn't come for glory," she said softly. "He came because he could not ignore pain." The students wrote down every word. For them, it was more than a lesson in medicine. It was a lesson in what it meant to be human. Later that evening, Evan stood at the edge of the field, staring at the twin moons rising over the hills. His body still ached, but his heart was full. Lyra joined him, carrying a small data tablet. "The council sent another message," she said quietly. He chuckled. "Let me guess. Another apology?" She smiled. "And an offer. They want you to speak at the Galactic Forum next month. They say the galaxy needs to hear your story." Evan shook his head slowly. "They don't need my story. They just need to remember theirs." He looked at her, his eyes calm. Long ago, every species started with compassion. Somewhere along the way, they forgot. Maybe this reminded them. Lyra's voice softened. "Then what will you do now?" He smiled faintly. "Keep helping." "That's what we do." In the following months, human aid stations appeared on worlds across the galaxy. Not military bases, but clinics, schools, and relief ships bearing the same symbol, the blue cross on white. It became a sign of hope known as the healer's mark. And wherever that mark appeared, people remembered the story of one human who answered a call no one else did. Years later, statues stood in his honor, not made of gold or marble, but simple bronze. One stood in the center of the terrene capital, showing Evan kneeling beside a child holding a medical scanner in one hand. Below it, a single line was engraved: "He heard our cries when the stars were silent." But to those who knew him, he wasn't a hero. He was just the medic who refused to give up. On a quiet evening long after, Lyra stood by his grave, her hands clasped before her. Flowers from dozens of worlds surrounded the site. The stars reflected in her eyes as she whispered, "You changed more than a world, Evan. You changed what the galaxy believes about humans." Above, the night sky shimmered with 1,000 distant lights. Somewhere out there, new distress calls would rise again, and humanity would answer them, just as he once did. Because that was the legacy of the human who heard a cry in the dark and said, "I'm coming." And from that moment on, the galaxy was never the same.